Hey guys, I'm back again and I'm here to do my top reads of 2021. Okay, so this was kind of hard to decide because I feel like this is the first year I've had tons of 5 and 4-star books. Usually I have like not as many 5-star books, which is pretty much the case. But I had a lot of 4.5-star books. So what I decided to do was combine my 5 and 4-star list and then just choose some of my favorites. So this is how it is. We have 22 books on this list. So let me get started because I don't want this to be too long because I have a feeling it's going to be super long. So I have my list right here. The first book is House of Stone, and this is by Voyo Rosa Shuma. Okay, so this one we read in the Read So Lit book club, and we had a fantastic discussion. This is the story of a couple who lives in Zimbabwe, and they are actively searching and waiting for their son, their only child, to come home. But as they're waiting, there's another young man who has entered their lives who is living with them, who supposedly is a friend of their son. And this person is a little disturbed. And he wants to be a part of the family as if though he is, a favorite son. And that's all I'm going to tell you. You have to read this book because it is so hard to talk about without giving anything away. It tells you a lot about the history of Zimbabwe, and the author does this brilliantly through this intimate story of this couple and this young man that's living with them. I highly, highly recommend this one. I would also highly recommend the audio because it's fantastic. I was like reading along for the first half of the book and I thought it was fantastic. And I was really loving the humor, and everybody kept saying, no, it's not funny. I'm like, well, there are places I thought it was funny. And somebody said, oh, you should definitely listen to the audio. It brings a lot of life to this book. So the second half, I did my simultaneous reading, listening, and I absolutely loved it even more. Yeah, this is one not to be missed. I don't think it was talked about enough when it came out, and I highly recommend it. Next book on the list is Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. And wow, this one right here is a novel turning around. The main character is called Phoebe Dolores Brown, and you will not forget Phoebe Dolores Brown. This is a story of a young slave woman who is brought up to believe that by the time she turns 18, she will be allowed to be free. And that doesn't happen. So that's not a spoiler. You kind of know that's not going to happen. And we see how this woman's life changes and how she becomes a force, and how she is a protector, and all of the risk and all of the things that she does for the reasons she does them for are just really incredible. It's a really great story based on a true person that the author heard about when she was on a walking trail in, I think, the state of Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. But I highly recommend this. It is a gripping and fast-paced read. I mean, I think I read this in 2 sittings. I had a hard time letting go of Yellow Wife to go to sleep. I mean, it was that good. I was very, engrossed in this particular story. I highly recommend it. Okay, the next 2 stories I'm going to talk about not so much in depth because these are part of a series. So I have The Story of a New Name, and I have Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay. These 2 books are, I think it's book 2 and 3 from the Neapolitan series. I highly recommend this one. If you have not read this series, Lord, pick it up. It's so freaking good. This is a real masterpiece, and this is a kind of series, because it's 4 books, it's a quartet. I would definitely be up for rereading this in another year. Just so very good, compelling. It's a story of two young women, two little girls that become friends as children, and we see them as they grow and how their relationship ebbs and flows over the years through husbands, boyfriends, pregnancies, women's rights, all kinds of things. It's just a very compelling, interesting read, and it has a lot of historical value as well, particularly how Italy goes through changes, but how it fits within the world at the time in which the books were written. Just so good, so good. Okay, the next 2 books I'm going to talk about briefly are poetry collections. These are the only 2 poetry collections I read. I usually read about 1 or 2, maybe 3 a year. And these were both proposed to me by Penguin Random House UK. And they were both really, really fantastic. And the first one was The Essential June Jordan. Like June Jordan, she is everything, was the classic, was doing it all. But her poetry, I had never read any of her poetry. And I felt like it was so good. Like I nursed it over the month, because this is a collection. I highly recommend it. It's very good poetry. I don't think it's difficult for you to understand or to get into. She talks a lot about, Black rights, women's rights. It's just edifying. She was fantastic. And we should talk more about June Jordan, because I don't think people really talk about her that much. But if you haven't gotten this collection and you like poetry, I highly recommend this one. The next one was a real discovery for me, because I'd never heard of her before. This is Wicked Enchantment by Wanda Coleman. Okay, now I did a little clip so that you could hear Wanda Coleman reciting her poetry. I'll link it below so that you can listen to it. I just think she was fantastic. This woman was the real McCoy. Okay, so this particular collection was put together and edited by one of my faves in poetry, Terrence Hayes. He put this together, and Wanda Coleman is pretty much a forgotten poet. She was a woman who did she had a lot of different jobs in her lifetime. And her poetry is hard-hitting and in your face, but the truth. It's all the truth. And she writes in a way that that is so hard-hitting and in your face. Sometimes it makes you laugh, sometimes it'll shock you, and sometimes it'll make you kind of little teary-eyed, because the truth will set you free, but it might make you cry. But Wanda Coleman was the business. So this is another one, if you haven't read Wanda Coleman, Wicked Enchantment, because this is bringing back all of her poetry in one place. I highly recommend you pick this one up. It was not talked about hardly. It wasn't talked about at all. But yeah, I'm going to be honest. It wasn't talked about at all. And it should have been, because this woman was something else. Something else. So 2 fabulous women, 2 fabulous poetry collections. Highly recommend. This next one, now I don't often read short story collections, but I want to try to get into reading more of them, because I think we discover how a writer gets into their writing. And this one in particular was one that I absolutely loved. And this was thanks to Christy from Christy Kia. We do book chats over on Instagram, and She said she had been eyeing Celeste Muhammad for quite some time. And so she said, yeah, she's got this short story collection. It's coming out this month. We need to get it. And boom, this one right here, Pleasant View. This is one excellent, I would say, short stories, so connected short stories. But it's one excellent collection. It has all of the balance that you're looking for when you read a short story collection. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Christy. All I can say is pick it up. It's not a happy read, so you got to get your mind right. But it is so well balanced, and the way she connects the stories is done really, really well. The characters are hard-hitting as well. They're larger than life, because this does not feel like something that is, oh my God, that could never happen. No, she basically looks at island life, and as you can see, the name is Pleasant View, but it is clearly not pleasant when you're reading some of the stories of the characters. Very interesting book. I must confess, I did pick it up 2 other times during the year to reread certain short stories because I liked it just that much. If you're interested in the interview that Christy and I did with Celeste Muhammad over on Instagram, you can go to my Instagram, go to my lives, and you can see it there. We had a wonderful discussion with Celeste Muhammad. She's a great writer, and I can't wait to see what she writes next. Okay, the next book on the list that I have is Song of Solomon. Okay, so this was a reread for me, but I hadn't read it since college, so it's been long. It's been a minute. But Song of Solomon is one of those books I had forgotten how good this book really is. And like when people do those capsule things and they put things inside the capsule and they bury it and they say, okay, in 20 years we'll unearth it and see what's changed and how things were before. This book is the book that I would put in the time capsule as a representation of African Americans. The book is just so great with its references towards African American culture, towards our connection to family, towards the difficulty in classes. It just talks about a lot of different things and brings out a lot of cultural and societal issues in a way that is extremely interesting, and it's extremely creative. The main character being Milkman, and that whole story around him is just well done. Well done, Toni Morrison. We like to see is a writer that is going to make us see all aspects of a character, whether they be good or bad, meaning that your characters are going to be in tones of gray and not just black and white. And she just does it so beautifully. There's so much heartache and sadness in the story, but there's this, underlying idea of it's the story of the black man. And I just really enjoyed discussing this book with the Read So Lit book club. We had 2 fantastic talks, and they both were so in depth, and we got so much out of it as we were speaking as a group. And I highly recommend this one. This is starting to be one of my faves over, well, it's hard though, because I really do like The Bluest Eye. It's one of my favorites as well. But Song of Solomon is definitely up there with my favorites now. Next on my list, I have Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. Oh, this book is an autobiography. Okay, so I've been following Ashley C. Ford for a minute over on Instagram, and I just think she's just the best thing since sliced bread. There's just something, the way she talks about her writing, the way she talks about life, that is just loving and powerful. And so when she was talking about writing a book, I thought, God, this woman's book is going to be good. I'm sure of it. So out came Somebody's Daughter, and I immediately picked it up, and I read it almost immediately as well. My goodness, so emotional and profound, and it's all around her, you know, her relationship with the father that has gone off to prison, that relationship that hasn't really been able to bloom, or because of that, you know, because of him having to go to prison. And then we have that relationship between her and her mother and her grandmother, which is the kind of family unit that is fairly common to some Black families. And so I could relate to some of the things that she was saying. And it touched me to my core. I could really, really relate to it. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Highly recommend it. It's maybe not one that a lot of people talked about, but I think that it's one that you shouldn't miss out on. It's very, very good. Next on my list, I have Daughters of the Stone, and this is by Dalma Llanos Figueroa. This book was another read for the Read So Lit book club, and it is a beautifully told story of 5 generations of women, starting from Fela, who is a Black woman who comes from Nigeria she's been made a slave, and she winds up in Puerto Rico. And from there we have the generations of women from Fela's lineage, and there is a mystical element of a stone that goes from generation to generation of women, and each woman has a particular power that they must learn to use if they need to use it, and how they need to use it. But it's more than just that. It's a story of generations of women and the difficulties that women have, whether it be to have children, to maintain their marriages, their mother-daughter connections, which is one of the main themes of the book. It's just a wonderful, beautifully written story. It's also quite emotional, and I commend the writer of this book, because what she's wanting us to feel when through the story, we actually feel what she's writing. I highly recommend this one, and you need to read this one soon, because the second part to this particular story is coming out the month of April, and it's called A Woman of Endurance. So get to this one first and be ready for A Woman of Endurance. The next book on my list is From Scratch by Timby Locke. So this is an autobiography, or should I say it's a memoir. Timby Locke is the sister of Attica Locke, the crime mystery writer. And this is a story that talks about Timby Locke's husband, who was Sicilian, and how they fall in love and get married, and the life that they have together and what happens with that life. And this is another story that's embedded in some serious emotion. Your girl was going through it reading this book. I just love the way she talks about the love that she has for her husband, for her daughter, for her family, and how she talks about how much her life changed when she married her husband, but how strong she was through all the difficulty that they had. And she does this through food, and it's just remarkable how food is more than just food. Food can be healing. Food can be a way to celebrate. Food can be so much. And the way she puts it together in this book is, it's not only, it's intense, it's romantic, it's sad, it's, oh my God, just such a good book. It also has some recipes in the back of the book, Sicilian recipes. I highly recommend this one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I read it twice. So I read the book and then I listened to it on the way down to my in-laws for Christmas, because we have like a really long drive, and I wanted something to listen to that would, that I wouldn't have to, worry about, taking notes or whatever after. And I really wanted to reread this one again. So I listened to it on audio, and it's read by Timby Locke, and it's just beautiful. Just a beautiful, beautiful story. Highly recommend it. It's called From Scratch, a memoir of love, Sicily, and finding home. Highly recommend that. Next on my list is Madeleine Résistante, La Rose Dégoupillée. La Rose Dégoupillée. And this is from Air Libre, and this is a graphic novel. It's in French. I don't know if this is ever going to be in English. You just got to keep looking for it. But this is to get an idea of what the book is like. It's beautifully drawn. This is the story of Madeleine Ruffo. Okay, so this is the story of Madeleine Ruffo. And as you can see, the story is told from Madeleine's point of view. In the beginning, they had a hard time getting Madeleine to want to do this, but she eventually decided to do it. But it talks about how she grows up and the things that affect her and how it brings her to want to join the resistance. The thing about this graphic novel that I find so interesting, because when I finished reading it, I really started thinking about how is it that certain things we live through as we get older can sometimes be a preparation for what we're going to live or what we're going to be. And I thought about this quite a lot when I had finished this one, because when we see what she goes through from the time she's a child up until the moment when, I guess she's like in her maybe late teens, like 19, 20. When you see how she gets to wanting to join the resistance, you start to realize that she was somehow, that this was her destiny. That this is something that was the right path for her. She's just one tough ass cookie. That's all I gotta say. She one tough lady. So I can't wait to read part 2. This is volume 1. I don't know how many volumes they're gonna have, but I thoroughly enjoyed looking at this graphic novel, and I loved how it's always painted in this sort of blue-gray. It kind of mimics the grayness of the time because, World War II. Highly recommend this for the francophones out there watching. It's really, really good. Yeah, Madeleine Ruffo, she is a force to be reckoned with, okay? She's not someone to be playing with. That's all I got to say. I know she's going to go through some stuff that's a lot worse than what she went through in the first part, but damn, she's like that's a tough cookie. Tough cookie. The next book on my list is My Beautiful Black Hair, 101 Natural Hair Stories from the Sisterhood. And this is by St. Clair Dietrich Jules. And this is a book that the author sent to me for review, and fantastic. So what we have here are a series of short interviews and pictures of Black women with their natural hair, and you'll have a bit of their story on the opposing page. And let me tell you, beautiful book, beautiful stories. I feel like this would make an excellent, it would make an excellent gift, especially for someone who is hesitating about going natural. I think if they had this book and could see all the different textures of hair, Black hair in this book, that they would see that Black hair is beautiful and that it comes in so many different shapes and forms, and you know, so many different styles you can do with Black hair. This will get you flowing back into the idea that natural hair is beautiful. Highly recommend this one too. Okay, next on my list I have Bibliodiverse Spines, which is by Jamise Harper and Jane Mount. Now, this is like an anthology of writers that are diverse, that maybe don't get a lot of press. And I was lucky enough to be able to contribute to this particular anthology, in which I contributed this book right here, Daughters of the Stone. If you look at, wait, here we go. Here's my page right here. So the book is separated into a lot of different categories, and within the categories you have content creators from Instagram who have suggested their favorites for the book. And so it's Jane Mount that does the illustrations, which are absolutely beautiful, and Jamise is doing the writing. I recommend that one. Next on the list I have A Cupboard Full of Coats by Yvette Edwards. This was the Read So Lit Read Along book for October in honor of Black History Month in the UK. OMG, what a discovery this one was. This is the story of a young girl and her mother that they've lost the husband and they've lost the father, and so they're alone, the two of them. And one day the mother comes home with a man that she's falling in love with, and this man enters their lives and things will never be the same. That's all I'm gonna say. I highly recommend this one. This is British blacklit, not something a lot of people talk about around here, but this was longlisted for the Man Booker in 2011. I highly recommend you pick this one up. It does not read like a Man Booker book. That's all I'm going to say. It is engrossing. It is full of food references that are very interesting, very well done. And the mother-daughter relationship and the family dynamic is also very interesting in this book. But it's a book that's going to make you mad in places, but it's so worth it. Great writing, great storytelling. And I had the pleasure of reading another novel by Yvette Edwards called The Mother, and that one was really good too. Next book on my list is How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherie Jones. This book right here, whew, you got to get your mind right, honey. That's all I can say. You got to get your mind right. This was the Read So Lit Book Club book for the month of June, which is Read Caribbean. And we were all gobsmacked by how traumatic this book was. I mean, real traumatic. But here again, Cherie Jones does a lot like what Celeste Muhammad does, is she tries to pull the cover off of living on the island. She's trying to make people understand this is not, white sandy beaches, sipping the coconut water and living life like, you know, eating seafood by the beach and there's no care in the world. Here we see all of the things that can go wrong and some of the things of how the life that you've lived for a long time, how it affects how you live the rest of your life. It's just heartbreaking, but so well written and so well done. It's a tight story, and it almost feels like someone whispering desperately the story to you. At least that's what it felt like to me. It felt like somebody was clinging to me and whispering in my ear with a lot of gusto, like whispering their entire story to me nonstop. That's what it felt like. There's something it's urgent about this story. So good. Do not miss out on this. Cherie Jones is definitely a writer we should be looking out for in the future. The next book on my list is In the Palace of Flowers by Victoria Princeville. Now this one right here is one that has made it a little bit around Instagram, but not as much as I would have liked to have seen it. This was published last year by Cassava Republic, so this is the arc that they sent me. This book was so good because it follows two Abyssinian slaves who are living in the Shah's palace, taking place in 19th century within a Persian court. So we have, I think the young concubine is Jamila, and Abimelech is the eunuch, and they're both Abyssinian, and we see that these two are connected because they are Abyssinian. We see these two people are kind of, I guess you can say, lost within this network, this closed community within this Persian court. And things happen which change each one's place within the court. And it shows how as a slave, you know, as an Abyssinian slave, you know, it's the same as any slave. Like, you are at the mercy of whatever anyone decides to throw at you. And this was interesting to read because of the way Victoria Princeville writes it. I think the best things about it are the dialogues, because it's within the dialogues that she gives us so much information about the culture of living inside of this Persian court. It's just so well done. Sex lives and shenanigans and serious stuff that can go wrong at any moment. It's just a really good story. It's intelligent, and we don't hear a lot of stories about, you know, Abyssinian slaves. So this is an interesting type of story of historical fiction that you should check out, because the character of Jamila was a real person, and she got it from, I think it was a journal entry from Jamila. Highly recommend this one. Okay, next book on my list is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I think a lot of people have heard about this book. This is the book that explores a story about a young girl of 14 years old, or I think she's 14 or 15, who is groomed by one of her teachers from school. This book had me in a, oh my God, I was like ready to hurt someone when this was over. I feel like this book is a book that everyone should read, because this is something that is actually happening today, but it's not something that a lot of people want to talk about. And it's something that we should talk about so that we are able to protect young people from these kind of predators. Highly recommend this one. The next book on my list is Erasure by Percival Everett. This is the second book by Percival Everett I'd read in 2021. I buddy read this one with Patrice Jones, and I really like this book a lot. It discusses a black man who is a writer and his discontent with the idea that people do not want to read or do not understand or do not want to appreciate the books that he's writing because they expect from him to write something a little different. And it talks a lot about family life and life with your siblings, your relationships and stuff. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it. The critique on the publishing world is hilarious. It's just really, really good. Highly recommend this one. Okay, next book on the list is There is Confusion by Jessie Redmond Fawcett. This is a Harlem Renaissance novel. I personally hadn't heard of it, but I highly recommend this novel because one, it's short, but it hits the themes to perfection. And so this is based on this idea of black people being very good at their jobs and being successful in their jobs. And I think it was a response to a book that was written by a white man writing about a black man being successful in business. And what Jessie Redmond Fawcett does is she shows us the difficulty that black people have, whether they're in the lower classes or the middle classes, that things just are not evened out no matter how much you try to be educated or get the best job, that you're still looked at down on as a black person. But despite that, forging on can only be a good thing because you will, have that good job or whatever. And she does it really well by telling the story through the eyes of a young woman who is in a middle class black family and another woman who is in a poor family. It's just her and her mother. And she does this through the ebbs and flows of life, with falling in love, getting married, not getting married, taking different jobs. And it's just really, really well done. And she brings in all of the characters that are surrounding these main characters, all add to the different various themes around this idea. Highly recommend it. It's not a book that a lot of people talk about from the Harlem Renaissance, but they should, because Jessie Redmond Fawcett was a fabulous writer. Next on my list, I have The Polygamist by Sue Nyaati. So this one I read after I read The Gold Diggers. So I read The Gold Diggers the year before, at the end of the year. And then I read The Polygamist towards the beginning of the year. Now the problem is, I was supposed to read them the other way around. I should have read The Polygamist first and then The Gold Diggers. That's okay. The Polygamist, Lord, snatched off all my edges and had me in a tizzy. I mean, that book right there. Okay, it discusses a man who has 4 different women, or 4 or 5 different women that he's having ongoing relationships with. One of these women is his legitimate wife. All these other women are girlfriends, or whatever you want to call them, side pieces, etc., etc. And so basically it shows the difficulty of women to, one, be married to a man who is going to be faithful. But not only that, it shows how some other women are motivated to get with a man, even if he is somebody else's husband, because they want to get pulled out of their poverty situation or their difficult situation. But it goes so far in this book. I mean, you just don't know when it's going to end. And it's not even a long book, but once it's finished, you feel like you read 500 pages because there's so much stuff that happens. But guess what? Totally engrossing, and I'm here for it. Here for the messiness of it all. Highly recommend Suniati's books. Go ahead and check out also The Gold Diggers. Excellent as well. She has another one called A Family Affair, which I haven't read yet. Hope to get to it this year. Yeah, real good read. And last but not least, I have Light in August by William Faulkner. This book right here is a reread for me. If you're a fan of Faulkner, but if you're also a fan of literary fiction, classic literary fiction, I highly recommend this one. I've forgotten how edifying this book is. I also forgot how good the writing is. Like, this man could tell a story. I just was like, I was flabbergasted over all of the different relationships and things that Faulkner makes within the story, and how he takes just a small group of characters, but then yet he gives you a whole long list of characters that they meet, because this one focuses on the character of Joe Christmas, who is a mixed race man. We think that he may be part black, part white. And we basically see all of the people that he comes across and how each one of those people kind of affects the way he turns out, but also affects some of the other more serious storylines of some of the other characters. And it's just, whew, it's hard. There was some bits I was just like, wow. It just made me go, wow. I remember discussing this one in college, and I remember we had some heated discussions about it, but I'm not really sure what we were getting all hot under the collar about, because that was a long time ago. But I thoroughly enjoyed this one because it was just a literary feast. That good. So good. So that's all the books. I hope you enjoyed that. Now we got to get back to some good reading in 2022. I hope to do even better this year. I'm going to try at least. At the moment, I'm, taking it slow. I'm not rushing into anything, and I'm choosing my books very wisely. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye-bye.